Robert Gardiner was a man of immense talent, a pioneer, and father of 10 children. Robert is my great-grandfather. He's also the progenitor of a huge, faithful group of descendants. Many of them are fortunate enough to have Gardiner as their last name. Robert was born in Liff, Dundee, Scotland, October 24th, 1845. He was the 4th child in a family of 10 children. Liff is a small village near Dundee, which eventually became a part of that city. The Liff Church was built in 1839, 6 years before Robert's birth. It is 4 miles west of Dundee. Liff is a tiny community. Robert's father, James Gardiner, was 36 and his mother, Ann Gall, was 27. James Gardiner was a tinsmith who made coops, tubs, and casks. James was mechanically versatile in repairing household utensils, clocks, and items found in the home. He joined the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints when Robert was 3 years old, 2 years before this photograph was taken. Robert's mother, Ann Gall, grew up in the picturesque seaside town of Stonehaven, Scotland. It is located on the east side of Scotland, just south of Aberdeen. Anne and James married in 1838, 7 years before Robert was born. Anne joined the church the 30th of November, 1848, the same day as her husband. Dundee is the 4th largest city in Scotland. It lies within the eastern central lowlands on the north bank of the Firth of Tay, a large body of water which feeds into the North Sea. In the 1800s, Dundee was the home of many textile mills. Margaret worked in one of the linen mills. In the 1800s, the Dundee Harbor was known for its shipbuilding. Margaret's own father walked 6 blocks to work, where he cut wood for ships in the Dundee Harbor. Life was not easy living in the Dundee tenements. The Gardiners were taxed on how many windows their apartment had. Many Scottish citizens immigrated for a better life. In 1855, Robert was baptized at age 9 by John Macbeath in Aberdeen. The Gardiners lived near the railroad station. Robert was apprenticed at an early age to the trade of confectioner and baker, and attained great proficiency in his chosen profession. At the age of 18, he was foreman of the Queen's Bakery, caterers to the royal family when it was in that part of the country. This recognition by royalty was considered a sign of honor. Margaret Stewart's family was visited by 2 ward teachers in the Dundee branch. Margaret listened to their teachings and was quite surprised when one of them started writing poetry to her. Her father said, "He's a fine young man, Maggie. Take him." Robert saved enough money for 2 adults and 1 child's passage and wanted Margaret to bring her younger brother Robert for company, but she thought it would be too selfish and insisted he bring his youngest brother Alfred, which he did. Robert Gardiner and Margaret were married on the Emerald Isle the first day it set sail, June 20th, 1868, from Liverpool, with 876 saints. Robert was 22 and Margaret 18. Shortly after leaving the port, great gales arose on the ocean, which buffeted them about for many days. The waves were mountainous, and many times the passengers feared they must be engulfed in the depths. Shoals of sharks and birds followed the ship, awaiting the time when another poor, unfortunate creature, wrapped in a canvas shroud, would be slipped over the side to become a repast for these scavengers of the sea. The exhausted travelers arrived in New York August 11th. The company was detained 3 days in quarantine. At Castle Garden, New York, they entered the U.S. and made preparations for the railroad trip to Fort Benton, 700 miles west of Omaha, the point to which the Union Pacific Railroad was completed. Robert, Margaret, and Alfred stopped at Niagara Falls and crossed the suspension bridge on their way to Utah in August of 1868. This was probably the closest thing Robert and Margaret had to a honeymoon. It certainly wasn't a honeymoon crossing the Atlantic Ocean. on a crowded ship with a sadistic crew and disease and death stalking them the whole way. At Fort Benton, they took ox teams the rest of the way to Salt Lake City. Margaret related how she and her young companions walked beside the teams, plucking wildflowers, which bordered the road in rich profusion as they sang the songs that carried their memories back to their native land of brown heath and shaggy wood, or the songs of Zion, which had awakened in their souls the anticipated beauties of their prospective home in the mountains. Many years later, one of her children asked her, "Would you not like to go back to Scotland?" "No," she answered. "Oh, maybe for a visit, but this to me is the land of Zion, and here I wish to live in the fellowship of the saints of God." Before entering the valley, they stopped in Echo Canyon to work on the railroad. Margaret helped with the cooking. It was late fall when they came into Salt Lake, riding down Parley's Canyon on a load of coal. Some good woman let them have a room in her house. In August, Robert was ordained an elder and sealed to Margaret the same day. They moved into a dugout up in one of the many ravines on the east bench of Salt Lake City. Here, Robert built a huge adobe furnace and started his candy making. He carried a sack of sugar home on his shoulder and made candy all night, and took it downtown on his shoulder again the next morning, bringing another sack of sugar back. Robert Gardiner was a man of remarkable physique. His physical energy seemed boundless. Walking 5 or 6 miles was nothing to him. After locating at the corner of 2nd Avenue and D Street, one of his first investments was the purchase of a wheelbarrow. This he used after building a small candy factory to transport sugar from downtown to his shop, where he made it into candy and delivered it to the stores downtown. While living at 2nd Avenue and D Street, Robert was under the necessity of hauling water in barrels by means of a horse and wagon. While doing this of necessity on Sunday, he was thrown from the wagon and run over. Getting water was difficult. Robert, being quite successful as a confectioner and baker, sent the passage money to his parents so they could come to Utah. They only remained a few years. Margaret overheard her mother-in-law say, "We came here expecting to see the gilded towers of Zion, but we only found mud dikes instead." So they left for Canada. In process of time and by his industry and energy, Robert was able to establish himself in the downtown section, where he built a flourishing business in the manufacture of all kinds of confections. A home was built in the 14th Ward, a block and a half south of Temple Square, where the older members of the family were born. Robert advertised his Deseret Bakery in the local newspapers. He sold, quote, "Gardiner's Monster Cake at 50 cents per pound, which will have gold rings in it like raisins," unquote. He also sold, quote, "Shortbread, genuine Scotch made in the highest style of art," unquote. Robert operated a bakery and a restaurant on Main Street. Gardiner's restaurant was located at 58 South Main Street, Salt Lake City, 1/2 block south of Temple Square. Robert sold first-class restaurant meals at all hours for only 25 cents. He also wholesaled confectionery and candies, both homemade and imported. Robert sold ice cream in his restaurant. His candy business flourished. It was fortunate that Robert brought his candy-making molds from Scotland. Robert used this machine in front to make lemon drops, and the machine in the background was used to make candy ropes. Robert was well known for his hard candy animals. The molds are still used in the family today and were very popular in the 2011 Robert and Margaret family reunion in Salt Lake City. In 1879, Robert obtained citizenship in the United States of America. In 1880, Robert and Margaret attended church at the 14th Ward in downtown Salt Lake City. For relaxation and fun, Robert played checkers. At this time, checkers was very popular, and tournament results were published in the local newspaper. It was a great accomplishment for Robert to be the 1881 checker champion of Utah. He won $50. For Christmas in 1882, Robert gave a copy of the Book of Mormon as a gift to his brother Alfred. Here is an 1883 photo postcard of Robert riding on a cow catcher of a steam engine. In 1885, Robert spent some time working on the Salt Lake Temple. About 1890, a severe depression occurred. Fortunes were wiped out, and many heretofore independent citizens were reduced to want and extreme poverty. The Gardiner farm was lost, investments failed, and the accumulated assets of years were wiped out. By 1894, Robert's son Clarence Gardiner described this period of time as one of, quote, extreme poverty and want. In 1893, Robert and Margaret attended the Salt Lake Temple dedication. The Salt Lake Temple was dedicated April 6, 1893 by Wilford Woodruff. In 1894, Robert is said to have allowed his horse to stand tied to a post for 14 hours without food or drink. He was arrested and cited for cruelty to animals and later was arrested again on a bench warrant. He was fined $5 and $20 in costs. This is the 1900 formal photograph of Robert and Margaret Gardiner family. Left to right back, Charles Stewart, Clarence Leroy, and Frederick. Front, Robert, Eva Winifred, Margaret Stewart, Beatrice Lenore, and William Francis. Their oldest child, Margaret, was married and not included. The enumerator for the 1900 Denver, Colorado U.S. Census lists 54-year-old Robert Gardiner as a lodger at 1755 Lawrence Street on June 1st. Robert Gardiner's occupation is listed as chemist. He was in Denver for a brief time working on his copper leaching process. In 1901, Robert Gardiner has been elected a director of the Clara Copper Mining and Milling Company. The Clara Copper Mining and Milling Company is incorporated with 25,000 shares at 10 cents per share. 7 lode mining claims located near Moab, which is near Arches and Canyonlands National Parks, have been purchased by the corporation. In 1902, the Gardiner process, when applied in certain copper ores, will reduce the ore to 93% pure copper in 30 minutes at a cost for the leaching of not more than 50 cents a ton. However, later in 1902, a modified Gardiner process was used at mines of the Clara Copper Mining and Milling Company, but it was found to be too costly. Robert, for some time, resumed his former trade of candy making, but never achieved the success he enjoyed in earlier years. Times were indeed hard, but by diligent effort and the help afforded by older children, a degree of success was achieved and the future became brighter. A new home was made in the 11th Ward, which remained the family abode at 43 Alameda Avenue. The purchase price was $1,200 in 1902. The Gardiners attended church here at the 11th Ward of the church located at 500 East and 100 South. Robert Gardiner's daughter-in-law, Hope Hewlett Gardiner, felt that Robert was taken advantage of by some of his so-called friends in a speculation scheme in which he lost a lot of money, which made it difficult for his family. By 1910, Robert and Margaret only had 2 children at home, including Charles, age 24, and their youngest child, Beatrice, at age 18. In 1913, Robert's previously owned and lost Brighton 200-acre farm sells for $25,000. September 5, 1914, Robert Gardiner was heard to say during the week, quote, "I play checkers for pleasure." We called at the Builders Association the other day and found a large number of men playing checkers and a few playing chess. Our good friend Gardiner was there also, mopping the earth with the players. It was very refreshing to see how cordially the players invited us to sit down and take the measure of our friend, and how cordially they hoped we might get the best of him, and cheered every time we came out ahead. which was not very often. We are sorry to say Gardiner is a hard nut to crack, and the best of it is he applauds a good game or a fine shot, and that is sprung on him almost as much as he does winning a game himself. No nasty jealousies there, and that is why everyone enjoys playing with him. Sadly, Margaret, the wife of his youth and the mother of his 10 children, passed away from pneumonia February 4th, 1917 at 43 Alameda Avenue. Present at the time was one of her daughters, Margaret Amelia Gedge, and 2 of her sons, Clarence Leroy Gardiner and Charles Stewart Gardiner. Robert worked in a factory. He's 5th from the left. Here's an interesting postcard photo of Robert. On the back of the photo it says, R. Gardiner, after 65 miles ride and the same back, 1/2 mile from Juan Roads on Rock Creek. This trek would be a major undertaking for a young man to travel over so many mountains to reach Rock Creek and back again. However, it seems almost impossible for a 74-year-old man. Here's a photo of Robert with his son-in-law William Reams Gedge and great-grandson Robert Lynn Layton. By 1926, Robert Gardiner cannot take care of himself as a result of a stroke, and he moves in with his son Clarence Leroy Gardiner's family at 928 Hollywood Avenue. In March of 1927, Robert Gardiner falls down the cellar steps at Clarence's home and is taken to the hospital. 5th of April 1927, in the hospital, Robert Gardiner dies as a result from bed sores at age 81. Robert Gardiner's daughter, Eva Winifred Cushing, is the only person with him at the time of his passing. His death certificate says he's been retired for 20 years. 7th of April 1927, Robert Gardiner is buried in the Salt Lake City Cemetery. All of Robert Gardiner's living children are at the funeral. Robert Gardiner lived a long, vigorous, and rather eventful life. It is a great honor to have Robert as my great-grandfather. It may be truthfully said of him that while not attaining a position of fame, he performed his part in the development and building of this inland empire. He was a man of generous impulses and died in the fellowship of the faithful.